So welcome everyone to our book club. This is part 2 for Toxic Parents. We just finished Lessons Learned from My Guru the Hard Way, and now we have a whole new start. And the reason why I chose this book is because all of us had parents or some caregivers growing up. It wouldn't be possible, right, to grow up on your own. So we had parents, and those parents made very deep impressions in us called samskaras that define our whole personality. And oftentimes we don't realize, it's in our, samskara means it's in our unconscious or subconscious mind, so we're not realizing how we're behaving and how it's actually, maybe hurting other people or hurting ourselves or blocking us from getting where we want in our life. And so, or we aren't able to have empathy or compassion for other people who are acting like that. We're just like, that person's so annoying, without realizing they probably have a very deep pattern or program in them that they're not aware of. That's causing them to behave that way. So this is a foundational book to understand ourselves and others, and that's why I chose it, so we can go nice and slow. And I'm going to explain, I'll be reading the book, cover to cover, but I'm going to go slowly and I'll be explaining from a Vedic psychology point of view also. So the concepts are there's 2 levels. One is what this doctor is teaching, this Psychologist Dr. Forward. It's very deep. Her points, as they are. She's connecting what happened in your childhood to how you act as an adult. And that's what we do in Vedic psychology as well. But I might go more deeper into some explanation in Vedic psychology terminology, or I'll add my own input based on my experience being a Vedic psychologist and working with clients for so many years. So before I start, I just want to say I'm so grateful that you guys are here and you're interested, because this is not like a fun topic. Nobody wants to really admit, that your parents were bad or wrong or hurt you, because a lot of us actually have our parents, in a very special place in our heart, even if they were hurtful to us. It's our parents. It's where we came from, and so it's really hard to look at this and be like, that actually kind of reminds me of how my mom was or how my dad was or whoever a primary caregiver was in your life. It's very hard to look at that. It's very painful. And this group is probably, this book club is going to be triggering, So number one, I'm grateful that there's some people who are interested in looking at this topic. I think a lot of people probably saw, ooh, toxic parents, no thank you, not my parents, wasn't me, not my parents. My parents aren't, that's up for other people, So the fact that you're interested and you want to learn about it, it shows, I think, a lot of courage to look at that topic. And so also but along with that is it will be painful. Reading this, you might be surprised, especially if you haven't read the book yet and you're hearing it for the first time. It might trigger a memory in you, or maybe you've already read it and you've been triggered. So what I would encourage you to do is be very gentle with yourself. If this is triggering for you, do not force yourself to be here. Might be easier to listen to the recording maybe after, something like that. You don't have to force yourself if you're getting triggered. Also, if you have a therapist you're working with, that'd be good to, if you're in the class, the book club, and you're hearing something that's triggering, note it down, see your therapist, or just remove yourself from the group, because I'd be surprised if it's not going to be triggering in some way at some point. That's why we're here, because if you're getting triggered, that means we've hit a samskara. And that's good, because this will help purify you if you are equipped for it and you're not like, oh, I'm triggered, that's this isn't for me. Instead, it's like, yes, the attitude would be like, yes, I am triggered, good. That means we hit something I didn't really realize was there for me. Some samskara, note it down and then work with a professional to help you work through that. So my third point is that this group is not a therapy group. I know I say it like all the time, like a broken record, but it's hard to understand what that means until practically we start talking and somebody says, well, in my childhood, this and this and this. So that group is not for this. If you are connecting a dot to your childhood, wonderful, great. But that you keep that to yourself and for your therapist. And the reason why is because we're not, I won't be equipped to help you in the way you need. If you reveal something like that, if you were one-on-one with me or a therapist, they're going to hold the space for you, they're going to go deep into what happened, but if you're in a group, it's not about that, so you're going to feel really triggered. If I say, well, that's not really appropriate for the group, you're going to be like, how could she say that to me? I was just sharing, So I'm saying up front, that I'm asking for your forgiveness, but I am going to have to do that if you bring up your personal issues. I'm going to say, okay, that's personal. Please, don't bring that up in the group. Not only because I can't hold the space for you, but also because you're probably going to trigger other people in the group even more than they might already be triggered. So that's kind of a ground rule for what's going to keep this space safe. Ideally what you're doing is you're listening, and then you're thinking about reflecting. It's going to be probably very reflective on how that might relate to you. And that's fine, and take some notes, but don't share that in the group. In the group, if you want to participate, what would be appropriate would be asking a question about the parents, not your parent. The parent, Susie, Billy Bob in the story. Whoever we're talking about, you can say, oh, now why is that toxic? I don't understand. That seems normal for me. But not for me, because my father was like. So we want to cut it at describing your parents or describing your personal experience, okay? Even though in your head, that's obviously why you're probably coming up with the question, because you're comparing it, but you don't share that in the group, because it can get very slippery very fast, and if one person does it, and if I don't catch it, the next person is going to say, actually, me too, my father was, he raped me or something, and that's going to go downhill fast. It can happen, especially when we start reading things like that. It may talk about things very triggering, and if you think, well, that's what we're talking about, so I'll share my personal story too, it can be very tempting to do that. It would be very healing to do that. That's a different type of group where up front we would say, this is a therapy group, there'd probably be 10 people maximum, you're all deep in therapy with me, and then we would do it. That's not what this is, okay? So I'm sorry to be so, lay out all the rules up front, but I'm trying to do it so it feels safe and so you want to be here. Does that make sense? Okay, any questions? Anybody online, any questions on the things that I've said before we start? Okay. Okay, so let's start. So, toxic parents, overcoming their hurtful legacy and reclaiming your life. I'll just hold it up in case some people don't have it yet. I don't know if you can see that. Everybody can see? Okay. I have a very interesting side story before I begin. So I was just home in New Hampshire visiting my mom and my family. And I was saying, I'm preparing for, reading this in the book club and everything. And my stepfather said, Susan Forward, the author. And I said, yeah. He goes, I know her. And I'm like, what? You? He's like an economist. I'm like, how would you know Susan, the author of this book? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, how? And he's like, well, my father married her mother. No. And she's my stepsister. I'm like, what? I don't even want to, he's like, yeah, I don't want to say anything else because it's being recorded, but yeah, it was a very funny conversation. And that's all I have to say about the whole thing. So anyway, so it's very, you never know. You never know who knows who. What's that, the 7 degrees of separation or something? Yeah. Anyway. Okay, so who are toxic parents? I'm really literally on the first inside page, and there's lots of editions of this, so I don't know if everybody has the same one. But what is mine? Mine says the toxic parents. This one was published, last publishing was January 2002 of this one, the last printing of mine. Yeah, okay, good. Oh, the other thing I'll say before I begin is that this book, the particular one I'm holding, if you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but there's red, there's red lines here. So this is, Babaji's read this cover to cover, and this is, I lent it to him, and he read it cover to cover and underlined all this stuff when, probably maybe 8 years ago. And he even wrote notes in. So whenever he's written something in or redlined it, I'll share that with you just so you can hear his thoughts on it too, since he doesn't have the time to be here now, but he did then when we were working on the Vedic psychology work together. So that's interesting. And we have created, I'll share it with you guys in the group discussion. That's the other thing. If you've registered for this, and that's how you got the link, because you're registered, you got the email with the link, that means you're part of our Kajabi e-course or whatever platform, our learning platform, online learning platform, and there's a discussion area in there for those of you who aren't familiar with that. And there's a lot of people in this group who you might have insights, questions, reflections, And also I'll be sharing there. So Babaji and I created a quiz, a new quiz that I'm going to share with you. So if you're registered, you'll get a link. And it's to assess, to answer these questions on your parents' parenting style, which is what we're going to talk about today. But we did it Vedic psychology style. So you'll see what I mean. But I'll be posting things there, from that are follow-ups on what we talk about. And that's very interesting too. And that's how you can feel kind of connected to him and his thinking as it relates to this topic, because that's very important. And the quiz I made with him it's on page 7 of the book, called Your Relationship with Your Parents When You Were a Child. So that was like, there's 8 questions there that were like very basic yes or no answers. And we took those ideas and made it into like our style, which is like scenario based. What would your parents do? If this is the situation of you as a kid, and then what would your parents do? So it's fun. So, and then it will tell you your parents' parenting style. So when you take that survey, you can share your results, and talk on the group, ask questions, that type of thing. Okay, so I'm going to try to make it as interactive as we can, given those kind of boundaries. All right, so let's read that first page, because that's even interesting, right? Who are toxic parents? So there's different types that are listed here. The inadequate parents, constantly focusing on their own problems. They turn their children into mini adults who take care of them. So with there's that concept called parentified child, where you become a parent when you're like 7 or 10. You lose your innocence. You lose your childlike playfulness and simplicity because of your parents' need. It could be emotional, like they're emotionally not stable for whatever reason. It could be physical. Maybe they all of a sudden got in an accident and they need your help. And also oftentimes, it's not purposeful. The parent is not trying to use you or abuse you in a way. They don't even have any idea what they're doing to you. They just have some very deep unmet need, and they're using you to fulfill it. So that's another point in general that I want to keep reiterating, that we're reading this book not to do a witch hunt and smoke out our horrible parent who did this to me. We're doing it to see how something they oftentimes unintentionally did hurt you then and is still hurting you today and making you act in ways that are, painful. So that's all. It's only to spot the root, kind of how it originated, and then we come off of the parent and then say, wow, even though that happened 30 years ago, I didn't understand that it impacted me in this way, and that's why I can't find my voice. I can't speak up for myself. Because when I was 7, my dad hit me so hard, something like that. He hit me so hard that I learned I'd have to be quiet. Or in this example, that I couldn't say how I felt because my mom had too many feelings. Her feelings filled up the whole room. So I didn't have enough for 1 inch of my feelings. So I learned by age 7 that it's all about her and her feelings. And to be a good girl and to get mom's love, I have to take care of her feelings and also anticipate her needs. The parentified child, they're in the kitchen cooking up a storm by age 7, or whatever mom needs. So that's the first one, right? The inadequate parent, focusing on their own problems and turning their children into mini adults who take care of them. The second type of toxic parent is called the controllers. They use guilt, manipulation, and even over-helpfulness to direct their children's lives. So have you heard of that type of parent or experienced or seen that type, right? So they're like completely, you feel suffocated by them, or maybe if you were that child, you didn't. But if you see how a parent acts like that, they're too over-involved in the child's life. They're controlling every move. It might even be called, now I think the term's called a helicopter parent, right? Where they're just like, they're over you all the time, hovering, and you just feel like, you can't make a decision of your own. Or they'll guilt you into things. They'll say something like, oh yeah, who needs me anymore? Go have fun with your friends. It's Saturday night anyway. Never mind how I feel. So the parent is kind of like living through you as their friend instead of realizing, oh, you're a teenager now, and that's so healthy for you that you're making friends. That's part of the healthy development of a child. Have fun with your friend. Instead, it's like they need you to be their friend, So there's lots of more kind of subtle ways that this comes out, this controlling type. Then the third type is the alcoholic. So they're mired in denial and chaotic mood swings. Their addiction leaves little time or energy for the demands of parenthood. So, I mean, here it's called the alcoholic, but it could be any aholic. Alcoholic is more obvious than the workaholic, you know, or the other types of, there's many things you can be addicted to. But for this one, the main point, if you see, is that they don't have, it says little time or energy for the demands of parenthood. So once again, the child is left without getting their basic emotional needs or physical, even physical needs met. You know, why? Because the parents' first love is the drug of choice or alcohol or work or something other than paying attention to that child and their needs, you know. And also this point about, it says mired in denial, you know. So with this type of, with addiction, one of the things that happens is that they never can see their part of the problem, you know. So with, you know, I used to work at an addiction treatment center, you know, for people trying to get sober and recover from drugs, alcohol, even pain pills, you know, pornography, whatever the addiction was. And you know, the way that the story would go with my clients and in general with addiction is, it's not my fault. You know, you made me do it. I made you drink like 12 beers. How did I make you? Because you were mean to me and I felt lonely. No, you felt lonely and you perceived what I said as being mean, you know, and you didn't deal with it in a mature way. Like you didn't try to have a discussion with me or try to take care of your own feelings. Now it's my fault that you got drunk. So that's how it is when you're working with people with addiction oftentimes. They're not seeing, you know, they're not taking responsibility for the drinking or whatever they're doing. And so a big part of the therapy is involving the family members, you know, and having the family members tell them directly, like what the issue is, you know, because they can't see themselves. And if you tell them, they just get pissed off and they'll quit the therapy. So it's very hard to get somebody to take responsibility for their problem if they can't see what it is. You know, and it's like to an extreme. I mean, most people in therapy can't see their part of the problem. That's why they're in therapy, because they can't see what they did. They think the problem is somebody else, right? That's, in general, welcome to being a human being, right? Because our ahankara, our ego is blocking us from seeing ourselves and our faults or our flaws. That's in general. But with addiction, it's very like turned up. You'll hear the craziest stories of why it's somebody else's fault that you know, are doing drugs. You know, it's always this victim mentality, you know. They hate to hear that, and if anybody struggled with addiction, I'm sure it doesn't feel nice to say that, but the reason why I'm saying it is because you can get out of it once you realize that. Once you can just continually answer the question, what's my role in all this? What should I be responsible here? Be responsible for here? You know, so, but being a child of that, what happens is oftentimes we go one of two ways. If you have an alcoholic or addicted parent, either one, you then become overly responsible for them. Since they're not responsible, the world did it to me. I'm just a perfected being and the world did it to me. So then you, as a child, you're like, oh, my poor mother or father, because you can't see that they're being a victim. And so then you try to like, I even had a client who was, her dad was a very raging alcoholic, you know. He woke up in the morning drinking alcohol and he drank it all day long. He didn't have a job. And she was quite young. And we know what her job was? She couldn't actually get a job. She couldn't get a boyfriend. She couldn't leave the house. She was in her 20s. Her job was to take the dad to the bar. You know, it was so sad. And the mom had become severely mentally ill because of the whole situation with the drunk father, and he has no money, they have no, the whole thing was going downhill. But the girl learned, well, mom's depressed. She can't get out of bed. And then she ended up having chronic pain in her whole body. And they couldn't figure out what that was, but it was a mental of years of depression. And then the dad was drinking all the alcohol. So the girl was like, her job was bring him to the bar and then stay up at night and be ready for the call for her to bring him home from the bar. And like have more drinks ready for him and stuff. So that's what I'm saying is, but when she's in therapy, she doesn't think there's a problem with that. You know, she's getting mad at me for saying, do you think that's a good idea? Like, you know, like, could there be another way? Like, it's almost like, how dare I? How could I bring that up? Of course this is good. I have to be a good daughter. Bring my father to the bar and give him the morning drink. Otherwise, he'll have withdrawals, and that'd be horrible. You see what I'm saying? So when you're a child, whatever the dynamic is, whatever caregivers you have, you learn to accept all of what they bring to the table, which sometimes is not much in terms of good things, right? You accept it all without questioning. And from a Vedic psychology point of view, it makes a lot of sense because your buddhi, your intelligence, is not developed. Your intelligence means not your IQ, but your level of discrimination and discernment. When you're 5, you can't discern. You can't think, oh, my dad's a raging drunk and this isn't good. What you think is, oh, I love my dad and he needs help. How can I be a good little girl so daddy will love me? Get him more alcohol, you know? And so that personality gets formed in those first 7 to 10 years of life before we're thinking too much, you know? We're just acting on emotion, you know? And then those samskaras get cemented in us for life. So that becomes our personality, and we'll find people like that for the rest of our life. We'll be attracted to people who need help, people who are victims. It doesn't matter. Maybe you'll be like, I am never going to be near an alcoholic again. That's fine, but you married a workaholic or a sexaholic or a somethingaholic. You married somebody, in a nutshell, who can't be there for you emotionally. That's how it works, these samskars. That's why they're so heavy and so deep. But this being in denial and being with an alcoholic is a very common thing, even though it's not oholic, you know, it's not alcoholic. It's something like even codependency. Many people are codependent. It's not even in the DSM. It's not even listed as a psychological problem, you know. And some psychologists are like, that's not even a thing. I think it's a thing. I've seen a lot of people who are codependent, you know, including myself, who's a recovering codependent, you know. So in codependency, that's addiction. That's an addiction. It's like what you'd call more of a subtle or soft addiction, but it's an addiction to toxic relationship. Whereas like alcoholic is addiction to toxic substance, right? A liquid. And you know, if you're a drug addict, you're addicted to some drug, you know. But the drug of choice of a codependent is a toxic relationship, meaning you're not going to ever get the love you want, and you're going to kill yourself to get it. You will compromise everything to try to get a crumble of love from that person who just isn't wired, not even capable to give it to you. But that's who you're particularly attracted to. Somebody who can never get it. Give it. Somebody who can never give it, and you'll never get it. And that's the attraction. Because guess what? When somebody comes in your life who can give it, you're like, run for the hills. You're like, ew, that person's so weird. Why do they like me? They're smothering me. They're so annoying. They want to spend time with me. They're so needy. Oh, God. That's how a codependent will feel when somebody shows up who's, you know, actually a balanced person. Because their samskara doesn't match that. Their program in them is that mom or dad couldn't give them that love because they were some kind of aholic, right? So they couldn't give them the love, the attention, the attunement. So when somebody does give that, it feels so strange and weird to them. They don't like it. They feel, oh, that person's too close. Even though they're crying for that from the wrong person. So they want the alcoholic, the workaholic, whatever, to give that to them. And they're trying everything to get it, you know? And then they feel so excited if they give it to them for 5 minutes. Yes, finally things are good with that person, you know? But then again, that person will go back to their way of not ever having enough time for them, not responding to their text messages for 3 days and all that, right? And then the person who shows up and who's really there, all they're going to do all day long is doubt that. They're going to doubt that the person is good for them. They're going to doubt that the person loves them and cares for them. They're going to doubt, and criticize everything about the well-adjusted, healthy, happy person who's trying to be in a loving relation with them. And they're going to just openly, with their full heart, throw themselves into the toxic relationship. Why? Because their samskara is making them, compelling them to do that, because that's the program of what got made in them those first few years of life. They threw themselves wholeheartedly into this loving relationship with their parent, which of course they would. We all do that. But because we don't understand, you know, as an adult actually, those programs and what made us do what we do, we just continue to act on them totally unconsciously. Just automatically, you know, just like a sneeze. If your nose itches, you're not going to be like, should I sneeze or not? You're like, achoo, achoo, you know, that's all. So that's how a samskara is. As soon as you see that person who you can, like, there's a room of 100 people, you can perfectly detect, like a dolphin with sonar, woo, that person definitely doesn't care about me. Yes, that person has no interest in me. Perfect. I love you. That's how it goes. Welcome to the world of toxic parents. Have we said enough for the day? Should we put on a commercial break? Okay. Thank God it's only once a week, right? Okay, so the verbal abusers is another type of toxic parent. Whether overtly abusive or subtly sarcastic, they demoralize their children with constant put-downs, and they rob them of their self-confidence. So that's a hard one, right? Because especially if the parent says it in a like funny or sarcastic way, but they're like, basically putting a dig at their kid. So if the father's doing that, it will make you feel like you are nothing, like you're not good at anything. You're going to have no confidence in yourself, because the father's job, imagine that, just imagine you could think of your parents as the people who are building a house, and you're the house, So imagine if the father has like a cannonball and he keeps shooting it into the house, So you're trying to get that house constructed nicely and solid, so when there's rain and snow and winds coming, that mom and dad have created it very strongly, so you're not going to be shaken. But oftentimes with toxic parents, they're actually beating down your everything. They're throwing a cannonball. Every insult, every sarcastic remark, every like laughing at you or saying something, about how you look or about what you can't do or what you're not good enough at, or comparing you to some other child, it's a little dig, and another shingle off the house. And then all of a sudden you're going to have no roof, So their job is to build you up. And then people are like, isn't that spoiling the kid? Yeah, you can spoil them. It'd be on a case-by-case basis. I could help the parents see. But a lot of the times that idea that, I'm making their head too big and I'm spoiling them, that is not true. If you're attuned to your child, if you're attuned to their heart and their needs, you're going to feel it in your heart when they're feeling down, and you're going to know exactly what to say to lift them up. And it's not a superficial thing. You're not telling them that you're Superman and you're going to, you're the best and the smartest and you're going to take over the world. It's something attuned. By actually, if you can see their strengths, you point that out. And you say, I know you're feeling down right now because this math problem is so hard, but you don't have to beat yourself up. This isn't your strength, but I'll help you. You're very smart. You can get this. You say something that you're kind of acknowledging where they're at and how they feel, but you're also like saying something uplifting, so then you're putting another shingle on the house and another shingle on the house. And Dad in particular, his job is to see your swabhava, your what we call your Vedic personality type. It's his job to say, wow, of course you're not that into the math because you're an artist. Look at the beautiful painting you just made for me, like on a Saturday, on your own time. It wasn't even for school. You're an artist. So usually art and math don't go together, so it's okay. You have another thing you're really good at. So let's just get this math thing done with. I'll help you, But I'm so proud of you with your art. Something like that, So the idea is, if your father's seeing who you are, and he's constantly lifting you up, then by the time you're even 7, you can see the kids whose fathers have been there for them. They're confident. They're not cocky. They're not overly confident, because the father also puts you in your place. If you get too proud, he'll be like, all right, listen, So he also helps you see exactly who you are and who you're not. That's the dad's job, constantly. He's involved in your life every day. He should be doing that. He also protects you. He provides for you. He does many things, and he plays with you. So you see who you are, not only your swabhava, your nature, but you see how you even physically are. You can tell kids who've actually had their father involved because they know how to play with other kids. And the kids who haven't, they don't know how to play. Either they're too harsh, and when I used to work with kids, I'd be like, all right, that kid didn't have a dad around because he smashes the other kids, He doesn't know, because with father, you learn how much you can push, how much you can pull, how, you learn all that through interacting with him, through touch, But if you didn't have that, either you're not going to play at all because you're not sure and you're going to want to sit in the corner and just read a book or play by yourself. You don't know how to engage. It's a very important skill that you learn with father, So playing is really important in the physical touch and learning. So then you know exactly, when you play with other kids, by the time you're 5 in school, you're doing it based on the 5 years playing with dad, And so that's part of the house that's built of your house that's built with father. Your nature, playing, father making you feel safe and protected at home, which is the opposite of hitting you and yelling at you, right? How are you going to feel safe if father's doing that? That's his very job, And providing. Then on the other side, there's mother. That part of the house she's building, her number one job is to nurture you with food, with your feelings, particularly your feelings. Her job is to attune to your heart. There's nobody closer to your heart, or who should be closer to your heart, than your mother. So if you're feeling sad, she should know that, and she should say it. Oh, sweetheart, it looks like you're feeling really sad right now. And she shouldn't have to even guess, because she knows you. I know you're feeling sad because, the dog just went out and we can't find her. And then you're like, oh, and that's how you learn your emotional vocabulary. That's how you get emotionally intelligent. That's how you get your emotional intelligence, from mom. Her job is to attune to your feelings and to say them. And then you go, okay, sad is that. Oh yeah, when I felt that, that's called sad, yes. And then mom says, angry. You're looking really angry right now. I can tell because you're clenching your fists. So when I worked at this, my undergraduate degree was in early childhood development. It was a part of psychology and human development. And what we had to do was they taught us how to, attune to kids. And they assigned us each to 2 kids, And so we would have to, for the homework, we'd have to go 3 days a week to this learning lab with the professor's children who, they volunteered their kids for free babysitting basically, but it wasn't babysitting. We were going to class and learning how to attune to children. And then we had to write about it, what we did. And then they would tell us, like, it's not your analysis of the child. It's not an intellectual thing. You have to notice their feelings and then write objectively, not subjectively what you think. No, the child did this, and I could tell by this, So even when the 2 kids I had they're 9 months old. So obviously they're not talking. I had to figure everything out by their body language. And these professors told me, and you have to talk to them though. Not like, oh, coochie, coochie, coochie. That's just treating them like a sack of potatoes. They're actually a human being, even though they can't speak yet, So you have to actually talk to them in a respectful way. And just say I have to pick one up to clean the diaper or whatever, I have to say, okay. The little boy I worked with, his name was named Ethan. I'd say, okay, Ethan, I'm going to pick you up now. I know my hands might be a little cold. You have to actually imagine. They said, don't just think of them like something you can throw around. They're a living human being with feelings, and their brain's developing. And would you just pick some adult up if you could? No, why not? Because they're bigger and they can speak back. So you have to treat the baby like that with so much respect. So I would explain it, and then just say, like, my hands were cold, or the air was cold when I was changing his diaper and he's crying. I would say, oh, I know that it's very cold right now. You're so cold. Okay, let me, and you have to adjust and attune constantly, minute by minute. And then you have to write about it, pages and pages, about what you did and how you attuned, So it was a very good act and practice of attunement. But that's what the parent's supposed to do. I mean, obviously we were in school to learn it so they could write articles about it. They were studying it, But unfortunately, there's no such thing as like a parenting attunement school, but there should be, because it's no fault of the parents. They don't know about it. I mean, I went to school for it, right? So they don't know what they're doing that's hurtful. All they're doing is acting on their programming of how they were basically hurt, right? And so, but anyway, that's really important, this attunement. That's the whole work of not being a toxic parent, of being a healthy parent, is attuning to even the facial expressions, and then mirroring it back, saying, I see that you're cold, you're shivering, and your body's cold. Okay, let me wrap you up, Or I see that you're feeling angry, your face is getting red and your fists are clenched. You're very angry right now. So whatever the feeling is, no matter how bad, I see that you're feeling disgusted. Are you feeling disgusted with me because I was so late, or because I didn't come to your soccer game, or whatever, So the parent has to take a lot of accountability and responsibility. And when that gets mirrored to the child, their feelings, their needs, then that's how the child grows up to be healthy and realize that all feelings are okay. All their feelings are okay. None of their needs are wrong. And all their feelings are okay. So that's how a person becomes healthy. But usually what happens is we get a lot of these negative messages that we're not okay. There's something fundamentally wrong with us because we had a feeling or a need. And that's why those are the cases when the parenting is toxic. When we're made as a small child to think there's something wrong with us because we had a feeling or a need, especially when that doesn't match with the parent. So that's when it gets sad, especially if you see, like, now us as adults, if you could be like on a little CCTV camera and watch young kids and see, oh my God, when I was 3, that, if you have a memory of a young age when you see how innocent and little you were, and what your parents said or did at that time, it's very sad to see. Because oftentimes as kids, like I said, we have the parents on such a high pedestal that we think we deserve that. You're not going to think there's something wrong with mom and dad, because we don't have the intelligence to think that. And what are you going to compare it to? The other parents you had last year? No, we have one set of parents, and they're not wrong. They're right. So that means I'm wrong. I'm bad. I should feel guilty. I should adjust myself, But that's the program we carry for the rest of our lives. Okay. So these verbal abusers we talked about, right? Constant put downs, robbing them of their self-confidence. Then there's the physical abusers, incapable of controlling their own deep-seated rage. They often blame their children for their ungovernable behavior. So now physical abuse is a whole topic on itself. Oftentimes when I'm working with a client, they'll say something their parent did, and I'll say, that's abuse. And they'll say, what? And I'll say, yeah, what they did is abuse. Parent can't do that to their child. And if you think about it, just think about some of the things maybe your parents did on a bad day, or maybe many days, but would you do that to an adult? Would you do that to one of your colleagues? Just say you get mad at them and you slap them upside the head? You take off your belt and start whipping them? Why wouldn't you do it to an adult? Why not? Because they'll do it back to you, or you'll lose your job, or they'll punch you in the head, or they'll shoot you. So why do you do it to a kid then? There's so many excuses parents make because they deserved it. I'm just teaching them, I'm disciplining them because they were getting smart with me. That's not okay. I'm sorry, that's not okay. If you have parenting skills, you will not hit your kids. Most parents don't have the skills not to do that. But it's skillful. You have to learn skills. You're not born knowing how to parent. You're born with very deep samskaras from how your parents parented you. And that's what you think is normal, and that's what you rationalize. That's what the ahankara does, right? Our good old friend, the ahankara we studied. So the ahankara is always right. And what is it right? It's right with this whole chunk of samskaras of how you were parented. So then you're going to do it unconsciously. Even if you think, I'm doing everything I can not to parent the way my parents parented me, I can guarantee you if you go to a therapist and you dig, you're going to see that, oops, nope, actually, I'm making my kid feel exactly how my parents made me feel, even if you're not doing the same thing. It's the feeling you're giving him. That's why I said, maybe your dad's not an alcoholic, but is he a workaholic? Is he a somethingaholic, which makes him not be able to be there for you? So same thing. You may not hit your kids, but maybe you use the words that are abusive, something to make them have that same feeling of shame, guilt, being diminished so small, So number one, physical abuse is, I think, important to study on your own. Actually look up what it is. So many times I say to my clients, well, if you were a child and you were my client and you told me that, I'd have to call the state and report it as child abuse. They'd have to come to your home and investigate, which I had to do many times when I work with kids. And very often the kids were not saved. They would lie to protect their parents, and the parents would lie, and then they would fire our agency, get a new therapist, So it's really hard. Child abuse is very hard, and oftentimes we don't even know what it is. And then we find out that maybe possibly I was abused as a child. That's a shocker, But it's important, not so now you can go back and tell your parents what you did was abuse. There's no point in that. It's so you can work with your own self and your own wounds to validate what you went through and to say that that was not okay what happened to you, and work with the therapist through that. It's important. Okay, and then there's the sexual abusers. Whether flagrantly sexual or covertly seductive, they are the ultimate betrayers, destroying the very heart of childhood and its innocence. So this one is a very touchy subject. I don't want to go much into it. I'll just say it's similar to the physical abuse. What I would say is research it yourself if you're ready to go there, because it's not only what you think it might be. It's a broad category. Even being exposed to seeing other people doing something like that when you're a kid is inappropriate. So research it to see, because it can make very subtle impressions on you that are still affecting the way you potentially behave now. That's as much as I want to say because it's too triggering, I think, to go there otherwise. And then at the end it says you're not to blame for what happened to you as a child, but you can do something about it now. So I think that's a good note to end on because it's hard. You see what I mean? Even the first page, it's like there's a lot there, right? A lot can come up, a lot of memories, and it's painful and it's kind of sad, you know, but that's why I said at the beginning, you guys are very courageous to even be here and even hear this, you know, and start reflecting upon it. So I'll open it up now for any questions you have about these types of toxic parents. Nyanshi?
In the section where it is talked about controllers, it says, and even over helpfulness to direct their children's life. How does that happen? Like, what could be the example?
One example, there's many, but you can use this as an analogy, like, or as an example would be like, just say your kid is 13 or 14 or 15. They're pretty independent by then, right? And you're like, no. I'll pack your lunch for you. What do you want? You know, they treat you like you're younger than you are, and they don't give you the room to grow. Or you're like, you live a few houses from school, and now you're like 16, and they're like, no, I'll walk you to school. And you're like, well, that's not cool, Mom or Dad. I want to walk myself. But they smother, they what we call helicopter parenting. You know, they descend too much on your life and make you feel suffocated and smothered for their own. It's for them, you know, to control and manipulate and all that. But it looks like overly helpful. It could even look good. Like, wow, they're overly helpful. Your mom's so involved, but she's too involved. Like, in other words, she needs to get a life of her own and let you grow and develop. Otherwise, she'll stunt your growth. And then you'll be in high school and you won't have any girlfriends if you're a girl, you know, and then you wonder why. Oh, because my mom's my best friend. That's not healthy. As a teenager, you need to differentiate, not because you're pissed at your parents, because they're supporting you in making healthy relationships with other teenagers, because that's part of growth. That's part of healthy growth. But if you have a overly helpful parent, they're not going to let that happen. It's going to look helpful, but it's really because they actually need you for their probably emotional regulation oftentimes. Does that make sense? Okay, good question. Anything else? Kamala.
I have a question.
When you spoke about the addictions, no? Addiction, alcoholic or workaholic and so, and then you say also that the codependencies is also an addiction. And so if you can little bit elaborate on that, because you spoke a little bit, but I could not really catch it properly, how it looks. So if you can please repeat. Or
Okay, so codependency is like any other addiction, because what addiction is you are attracted to something and you're acting on getting that thing in a way that is hurtful to you. And you, despite that, you still do it, right? So with alcohol, you'll see the alcoholic, like the story I described, the dad couldn't even go to work. He was waking up drinking alcohol, he was drinking alcohol all day. He had lost the relationship with his wife and daughter, and he kept going. It's an addiction, I mean, he can't stop it, you know? So with codependency, it's the same thing. What will happen is oftentimes codependents get in relationships with narcissists. And the narcissist will use them and abuse them and reuse them and chew them up and regurgitate them, and they feel like a shell of a person. And then the next morning they're calling the narcissist, trying to get another crumble of love. It's an addiction. You can't stop it. Even if you're online searching, oh my God, that person's a narcissist. Doesn't matter. You're still going to walk into the jaws of their tiger, mouth, because you can't stop it. You can't break it. Got it? Okay. Anything else? Anybody online have a question? Would the hand be up? Would we be able to see? Okay. No questions? Okay. So I will post on the discussion the link to the parenting type survey, and you guys can take it if you want. It's interesting. You can see your parents' parenting style. When you take it like thinking of only one caregiver. Don't take it, because the question might be like my parent, but don't think, yeah, my mom and dad were like that. Just take it one time and be like, okay, my mom, every question. There's only 8. every scenario, these 8 scenarios, think my mom. And think of it, a lot of times people will say, well, my mom was like that when I was younger, but she's good now. We worked through it. Doesn't matter. What she did in those formative years when your personality is developed, that's the issue we're focusing on when we talk about toxic parents. Because oftentimes our defense, our ahankar, and goes and defends mom, but mom and I are fine now, you know, she's changed so much. That doesn't mean she didn't do some damage in you those first 7 to 10 years. So when you're taking the survey and when you're thinking about what we're talking about in this book, think about the first 7 to 10 years of your life with like one parent, you know, when you're taking the survey and when you're thinking. Otherwise, the ahankara comes in and starts defending mom and dad, you know. Or she only did it one time. That's the other thing about abuse. Even if they only did it one time, that's enough to do a lot of damage, because when you get abused emotionally, physically, sexually, it affects your brain development. Many, many people are in a constant fight or flight, hypervigilant state from something that happened to them when they were 5. Even if it was one beating. You know, it throws you off. You're just a tender little flower. You know, you're very tender, you're very open. And when something happens like that, it throws you off completely. And like you're still shaking from that. You know, and you're still making decisions based on fight or flight, hypervigilant state, but you don't realize it. So, anyway, okay, so I'll end for now, and I'll see you guys next week, and maybe some of you online on the discussion forum. Okay? Haribo.